Hello everyone, welcome to the second webinar about material development. I am Alessandra Soro, Material Pioneers Community Manager, and today we are here to talk about how to speed up material development and what is delaying the process. Today we will have two guests, Aaike van Vugt, founder of VSPARTICLE, which is the company that is empowering material pioneers, and Pedro Mendes from Gent University, which is a researcher. The webinar will be structured in two parts. We will have 5 to 10 minutes of introduction by our speakers, and then 20 minutes of discussion together with the whole team. If you like this webinar, you can visit our website and register to the coming one. It will be about academia and research. I will give you the floor to Aaike van Vugt, co-founder of VSPARTICLE. He will talk about how to accelerate material development with nanoparticles. Thank you, Aaike.
Thanks, Ale, and thanks everybody for joining this session. Ale asked me to give a short example of the complexity of material development, since VSP is focusing on solving some of the problems in nanoparticle material development. I will guide you through the learnings that we had during the last years and the examples of the complexity related to it. If you have any questions, then please make a comment in the meeting chat and write question or comment, whatever you want, and then I will call your name and give you the time to pose your question. In that case, we can keep it a little bit organized, otherwise everybody will start shouting through each other. But feel free to comment or to question anything in between. So I'm not sure who of you is working with nanoparticles or with other type of nanomaterials or new materials, but at least we've seen that nanoparticles have had an enormous increase in interest in research. Nanoparticles are used and applied on a variety of different applications, and shows great promise. But on the other side, we still see that there's a huge underlying problem. Even though we see a great potential of solving huge problems, for example, the energy transition with new energy materials enabled by nanoparticles, we still see that the average development time from a new material, so from the start, when you do your first principal studies in the lab, all the way to enabling mass manufacturing, it roughly takes 20 years to do that. And this 20-year time frame is a real mismatch with the time frame that investors have or government policymakers. And that's also why it's really difficult to really boost and accelerate material development because of this long time frame that you need to have. So normally, material development can only be done at fundamental universities or big corporates that have huge R&D budgets and are able to finance this long R&D time span. From our perspective in the field of nanoparticle-based materials, there are two underlying problems. One is that fundamental nanoparticle research is really still a trial and error based approach because we don't know exactly which nanoparticle is ideal for our application. We need to test multiple and find out by doing it. And the second thing is that maybe besides industrial production of catalysts, industry is still lacking new tools and technology to quickly scale the production of nanoparticles to large quantities. So if you as a scientist developed a new nanoparticle in your lab, probably it will still take 10 years to scale it up to industrial production. So to give you an example of what we see as a trial and error based approach in material research, and please comment if this is not something that is in case for you. So in most cases, you find a nice application or you have a nice idea of a new area you want to investigate. Then you will start designing your hypothesis. So a certain nanoparticle and a certain substrate. You start to look on the internet to find different recipes, or you are finding a supplier to get the nanoparticles ordered. So then you do the synthesis or you wait for delivery. The next step is to do some quality control, because you know that nanoparticles are having different properties depending on their size. So you want to make sure that the nanoparticles are indeed correctly. Or you get maybe a certificate from the supplier. The next step is to do the impregnation. So to get the nanoparticles onto your support, which looks an easy step, but is not that easy at all. And then afterwards, when you made your final material, you do all the characterization to really find out if the nanoparticles are adding beneficial properties to your product and making your product an improved version. And of course, as a scientist, you hope that you then have your success and you go to your Nature and Science publication and become a terrific scientist. What you expect is that if in the analysis part, you maybe find out that the particle that you are analyzing is not the right one. So you maybe need a slightly bigger one, smaller one, maybe a different material. So you need to go back to your design hypothesis and reiterate the whole process. But we also see that due to the complexity in handling nanoparticles, researchers are stuck in different iterations in between. And that going from the left to the right in one flow could already take up weeks, months, and sometimes even years. We have spoken to many PhDs and postdocs that started their PhD by just reproducing some results from a previous PhD, which were very interesting, but already reproducing the previous results, even though that most of the recipes and synthesis steps were well written or well documented, turns out to be quite complicated. To give you an idea also of what people are doing to create the nanoparticles, I added also some movies. So these movies are taken from YouTube, where researchers are showing each other how the synthesis is taking place and how to do it. So in this case, it's reduction of a gold salt. So you have gold ions in the liquid, and then by adding other chemicals, you are reducing them to gold atoms. And then you will see that the gold atoms are agglomerating into bigger clusters of gold, forming nanoparticles. So the liquid color is going from transparent to black, because the bigger nanoparticles are then absorbing more of the light that comes into the liquid. So you see the formation of gold nanoparticles in the liquid in this case. And then to give you an idea how those nanoparticles are immobilized on a support, we go to the next movie. So in this movie, which was one of the best movies that I could find, they are immobilizing gold nanoparticles from the liquid onto a TEM grid for quality control. So what they do in this case is to put the TEM grid into the liquid, and then they wait for several hours, not really specific in my case, to hopefully have some nanoparticles deposited on the TEM grid, and then they go back to the TEM microscope to do the analysis. In this case, they were lucky that they have some nanoparticles on the grid, but it's not easy to change the loading, for example, or any of the other parameters. In this case, you also see that some of the nanoparticles are still a singlet, and some are already agglomerated on the support. So this is the starting point, I think, somewhere around 2014, where we founded the company VSPARTICLE. So as a researcher myself, working also with nanoparticles, I thought this is not the way it should be done. There's so much potential in the nanoparticles, and everything that we want to do with the company VSPARTICLE is to help others, enable others to unlock this potential as quickly as possible. So what we did, we set ourselves a mission to really take out, from our perspective, the most complex part, so the nanoparticle synthesis and immobilization on your support. So this is our goal, is to get the process simplified for you, so that from your hypothesis you could directly go to your analysis without being bothered by all the complexity related to nanoparticle production and handling and immobilization. So we call it nanoparticles at the push of a button. And luckily, I can tell you that we are getting better and better in doing this. So we are really focusing on automating nanoparticle material production, both initially for research purposes, but also for industrial purpose. But while being in this field and helping researchers speed up their development already by taking out this part of their work, we found out that the use or the need of new energy materials is so important in the coming decades, for example, for the energy transition, that way more change is needed than just simplifying synthesis. And some of the change that is needed, we cannot enable as a company. It should be enabled by working differently as a community in the field. And that's also why we started the Material Pioneers community. Because we think if we can catalyze or enable them to discuss on different topics and collectively work more efficiently or more focused, that could drastically improve our capability to develop new materials. And that's also why we are so glad that we are now joining forces with the Young European Catalysis Network, because we think that speeding up the development of new catalysts and also new electrocatalysts is very important. So I hope I gave you a short introduction on the complexity, in this case, related to nanoparticle research and how important it is to accelerate this research. I think now Pedro will take over the presentation and talk about some of the other aspects that we need to improve.
So let's check together if there are some questions to answer right away.
Is any of you working with nanoparticles in his research?
Well, I am.
I know you are.
not on catalysts, but no. It does save a lot of time if you don't need to work on a recipe for your particles. It's just produce and analyze.
Well, what are the other materials that people are working on? Zeolites, MOFs? You can just type it into the meeting chat.
I would like to introduce you. We probably know him already. Pedro Mendes is a researcher of University of Gent, and is one of the co-founder of Young European Catalysis Network. He will talk about how to join forces to speed up materials development.
Thank you, Ale. Thank you also, Aaike, for the nice presentation. So UCAT is here today because our mission is to help each other as people interested in catalysis, young professionals interested in catalysis, to solve scientific but also societal problems. So that's also why we are joining forces with the Material Pioneers, powered by VSPARTICLE, and in this case to speed up materials development. So what we are doing here today is to give a framework to some of the issues Aaike already raised, and mainly to spark your ideas, so that's it. In the next minutes we can brainstorm together. So one of the points Aaike already touched upon is the fact that we all need to work together. So as the figure on the left-hand side represents, we are now each other approach the problem from our own point of view. In fact, we even tend to define the problem from our own point of view, and then we find a solution also that most of the times only works for us and not for the whole community. What we should try to do, or what would be the ideal case scenario, is that everyone participates in the definition of the problem, but also on finding those solutions, and that we have ways of interacting that are more productive than the ones today. So the question is to all of us, how can we do this better? There are already some studies, there are already some answers, but one of them is in this study there. But the question for us all as a community is, how can we find these answers together? Then as being part of academia, there's also specific problems to cope with there. This is just one of the examples. Mainly, there have been there's a culture which favors publication and yes, impact in a narrow sense over anything else. So that already generated a crisis of reproducibility, even from 2013. But not many measures have been taken. And in fact, you see 6 years later, this winter, during these Christmas holidays, the publication was still what scientists were mainly doing, even during holidays, instead of focusing on the true scientific and societal problems. So again, the question here is, how can we solve this together? Which buttons can we push? In fact, who can we influence to solve this problem, to make sure that we are working to solve the problems of society and not to publish only more papers. Finally, one possible solution to all this, but again, what we want is your opinion on how this can help you. It's open science. Open science is about breaking barriers to knowledge and also improve collaboration. If you can see through someone's notebook, of course, that can have some challenges. Open should be just as open as possible, but open will ensure that you can trust on other people's data, on other people's procedures, as Aaike also mentioned, and also be able to collaborate, to take what was already done 20 years ago, give it another look, and try to get new insights into already existing data, experiments, workflows, whatever people have already done, and we should not spend time repeating just because this knowledge is not open enough or not available for us to use. So that's it. These are only 3 aspects of what we can to be addressed to help solving the material development problem, but also to help science in a general way. So as a network, as UCAT, it's something we want to embrace to help each other to solve these problems. How can you help also the community? I think that's the question for that is about to come for the brainstorming session.
So thank you, Pedro. Now we can open up this brainstorming session. Please be kind. It's the first time we do it, so be patient. The idea is to try to give everybody the possibility to talk, because that's what we actually means an open conversation. Of course, we are behind our screens, so it's not so easy. But I would like to ask you to participate to the conversation by raising your hand in the meeting chat, typing something like "I would like to participate" or something that gives us a sign that will enable us to unmute you and give you the floor.
Can you hear me? This is Lars now.
Yes, hi Lars.
Great. Well, thanks for the great webinar series and the example. For me, is what I really can't grasp right now is what is actually delaying material development from a technical point of view, right? Because if I think back in the history of catalyst development, I think there was 2 great examples where it really worked. It was the Haber-Bosch process, where a catalyst was developed quite quickly, and also in the 70s, 80s, the 3-way catalyst for the car to prevent acid rain, like a problem we really solved now. So for me, I don't understand. I don't know what is preventing like material development right now. So if we set a goal now and say, okay, we want to make a catalyst for CO2 reduction, what is the technical factor that delays it?
So from your point of view, there's no, it's quick enough. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying it's quick enough. I think I also see the problem, but I don't know what is the bottleneck there.
Well, I think you already mentioned 2 great examples of where catalysts were developed under, I think, quite a lot of pressure. I think it's not if you compare it a bit to the crisis we are now having with the pandemic and the corona crisis and the enormous amount of speed and development you see in the development of vaccines or treatments, it's unprecedented. I think it's really we're only capable of doing such a global collaboration and speed of innovation under huge amount of pressures. But I think since the development of new materials, at least from my perspective, is so important in a variety of fields, and one of the major fields is the energy field for fuel cells and batteries and electrolysis and CO2 utilization. I just think that if we can develop them way quicker, that is needed. I think if you look into the climate crisis, we need to start solving major problems in the coming decades. And I think if you look into the average development of a catalyst that I explained, the 20-year time frame for one new catalyst to come to the market, I think it's just a mismatch. I think it should be that the new catalyst could be developed maybe in 1 to 2 years and bring it into the market relatively quickly. So that's my feeling of the need to accelerate material research. And I think by effectively adopting some changes, it could already be done. So for example, us as a company, we are speaking with many different researchers, and many of them are doing exactly the same research, exactly the same type of nanoparticles, exactly the same type of applications. For me, it feels like we are not using the resources, the passion, the energy of people sufficiently enough to really address those problems. The fact that they are not talking to each other effectively is because they want to be the first to publish this result in a top publication. And for me, the question should be, is that the most important thing you want to do as a scientist in your career? It is at the moment. But from a more global perspective, of human perspective, maybe advancing by collaborating is more rewarding in the case of speeding up. Is that a question, an answer to your question, or?
Well, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we need to be quicker, and I also see that problem that there's, first of all, there's people or researchers doing the same thing all over the world and not knowing of it, or just, of course, you need to publish or you want to have a career, so you need to do something, right?
Yeah.
But I was looking more at the technical point, like what is if we say, okay, we have all we take away all the politics and these kind of things, we commit now and we have the resources to develop a material. What is the most difficult point, like from a technical point of view?
I think one part already could be is that people are so focused on only publishing their positive results. But all the negative results that you are making in the meantime, you are not sharing. So there's a huge potential that all other researchers are doing exactly the same, let's say, wrong tests. Yeah. And just by sharing that information that you analyzed this material for this application and it didn't work out, there was no beneficial effect, could already prevent others to do the same. Another part that we are seeing is reproducibility. I already addressed the part that we have spoken so many PhD students that started their PhD with just reproducing previous results, which turned out to be highly complicated. Yeah. So if you can solve reproducibility and enable the community to really build on top of each other, that if you see a publication in Science, you can scan a barcode, and that enables you to synthesize exactly the same nanoparticles as in that research. So you can use it as a starting point to build on top. That would already be a great step forward. Yeah. So standardizing synthesis processes, taking out in regular, so taking out variations, sharing all the things that didn't work out. Maybe splitting up research fields to say, okay, it's not useful to all try to develop the best electrocatalyst for hydrogen production. Maybe Germany will focus on this set of materials, and the UK will focus on that set of materials, and then we can screen a way broader field instead of all. You can compare it to football. If everybody tries to get the ball, it doesn't really work. So you need to be strategic and locate yourself across the field to get the biggest spread.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so synthesis is the main step. So synthesis of the active particles, let's say.
Yeah, at least it's one part. I'm not saying that it is. I think more it's completely understandable that as a scientist, your main career or your main focus is to show a very nice high impact application. I think that's something that doesn't really has to do with the synthesis, but has to do with the business model behind it, the business model behind science. And I think in a strange period as now, as I mentioned with Corona, you see that no one is really caring about whether or not it will be published in Nature or Science. If they can open up the economy and solve some of the pressing problems, I think that's another focus point.
Yeah. Okay, I agree. Thanks.
So one of the things we also wanted to discuss a little bit about is, if some of you already have some examples of good practices in your field. So if you already work in a group or in a university where everything works or some things work really, really well, this will be a good moment to share it, because also good examples are already out there, and I think it will be great to maybe expand them and learn from them.
So I'm Joost. I work in the LCK lab in Delft, which is a microelectronics clean room. And the big challenge for most projects here is to develop your chips. And that means that you need to have the right process, use the right tools. Some of these flowcharts takes weeks to complete. And that requires a lot of experience from the engineers to do that properly. So there's a whole team of people here that only keep the tools in top condition as far as they can. And a lot of thought goes into making these flowcharts, so you get the devices on your silicon that you want. And I know that for new students or researchers in our group, it's very hard to learn exactly how these tools work, because there's a lot of subtlety in some parts of a process. So we rely a lot on the more experienced processing engineers to help us make what we designed. And I think that's a big problem in any type of research, because when, for example, a PhD student leaves and he developed a new process to make some cool device, or he developed a new method to make a new feature, once that person leaves, he writes his thesis and it should be complete enough that you can replicate it. But more often than not, that's still difficult, because it's hard to write down exactly what you did and how you did it. I mean, for me, it's already sometimes hard to reproduce what I did, because I forgot to write down one parameter in some tool somewhere. So I can imagine if you do that on a global scale, that reproducibility is already holding back a lot of development. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Maybe I can step in on that, Pedro here. So I think there will be different answers depending on the scale and type of techniques you use. But I would say that one important thing is really to fund the science of reproducibility. So I think all we have been hearing calls for changing some way of how scientists are rewarded by their science. And one important thing is indeed to ensure reproducibility. For instance, 30 years ago, the community joined, the catalyst community joined to make a few catalysts that were tested in labs around the world to determine what was the typical error, how the methods differ, etc. This is a work also, for instance, yeah, UPAC still does, NIST for other type of data. So I think it's a matter of also putting time, effort, and money into the science of reproducibility. I think today I understand we all see it as being very difficult, but if there's a common effort in making also, as Aaike said, standardized procedures, I think we can achieve there. But that's it. It also means that we should spend more time and effort on that instead of just generating new results. And for that, we need, of course, the funding and the corresponding rewarding system, I would say. With that, I would like maybe to ask the other people around how much they were they got the incentive to reproduce research really from previous colleagues, and if they feel they have the time for that, or they also had troubles with getting their results right. What is your feeling or experience?
Well, maybe Lars here again from Wageningen. So I have the feeling that reproducibility is not high priority in the labs right now. So because at least in the university labs, because then it's it has been done, it has been published, so you cannot publish it again. So that's my point on that. What maybe to add what Joost just said. So what I try out now with my master students, it's on modeling and simulation. I try out code reviews. So students share a part of the code and they review that independently. Maybe they work on a different project, but they just review that code work. This is what I got from a friend who works in programming, and they do that quite a lot. So maybe that's something also for synthesis, that if you have a recipe, you give it to a fellow PhD or postdoc and say, hey, can you try this for me and see what you get? So might also be feasible because it might not take so much time.
Yeah, I think that could work. I know that in the clean room for most tools, there is a lot of standardized recipes to say, okay, I want a 100 nanometer layer of silicon oxide on my wafer, or I want to etch this deep, and then you have these settings with this etching time. So there's a lot of things like that, and I know that there's in the tens of years that they're working here now, they developed hundreds of recipes. So what people now do is that you have to present the flowchart to the engineers. They say, okay, is this safe? Is this feasible? Contamination issues, everything. But they can also check if what you want to do is possible. And those people have worked there a lot longer, so they can by intuition already tell you a lot. But inside the tools, there's also a lot of standard recipes for standard things. But the problem with research is, of course, that you often try to do non-standard things. But yeah, that's the research part.
Maybe I have something to add on this, but because I think it's not only the effect of synthesis. What we have seen also coming up, and if you look into most of the publications, there's a huge interest in high throughput experimentation as well. So it's not if synthesis becomes quicker and quicker, then you are able to use all kinds of automated equipment and computer programs to start going into high throughput experimentation. And also in that respect, we see a lot of researchers focusing a lot of time and energy to develop their own in-house developed high throughput experimentation setup. And I think it should not be same as the case with Joost. It should not be your focus to optimize the tool or to make the tool work or to get a good result. You should be focusing on using the infrastructure to get useful data out of it, and then analyze the data and interpretate that. I think that's where scientists are trained for and are most useful in, not to become electrical engineers and to screw their own high throughput experimentation setup together. So also in that respect, how to speed up in the fact of numbering up, so high throughput experimentation, how can we join forces and do the development of an scaled up experimentation setup once, and then everybody can use that to continue their work. I don't know how others are thinking about it, if someone is maybe using high throughput experimentation already. Maria or Monica?
I would like to comment. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Sorry. So I would like just to make a comment. I have probably a strange idea, but why not? Would it be useful, for example, to make a database of recipes? And everybody, if they can access this, already tried recipes with already published results. Because probably everybody is trying to protect the catalyst they synthesized and not to give away already the results that weren't published yet. I don't know. Because I tried. I'm a catalyst. I'm working with catalysts, trying every day to synthesize new catalysts. And first things that I do, I always try an old recipe and see if it works, and it gives the same results, but not always it works.
Yeah.
So that's why I was, if it, for me, for example, it would be very good to have a database and already say that this recipe works, and this is the result of with the characterization, like the NIST database. So that's an idea.
You want to answer on that, Aaike?
Oh, you can also answer it if you have a.
No, so that exists in fact, but I think for very specific fields. So, for instance, for photocatalysts, there's a database called materials experimental database, if I'm correct, and there they do publish publish basically their high throughput experimentation. So materials experiment and an analysis database. You can find it readily on web. So there they do publish all their high throughput experimentation, and you can find the synthesis, the characterization, and even the catalytic performance. But so that exists. What you need is someone that is willing to use their high throughput to share their results. I think that calls us for more tools that are more shared, a bit like synchrotrons or other kind of tools that are available more to the community and just provide services to the community, I would say, because high throughput is still relatively expensive to most of the labs in the world. So I think that's the problem today. And I agree completely with Aaike that, in fact, companies that manufacture high throughput should share their simple plans, because the high throughput manufacture costs decreased a lot because they are now getting 20 years old in the business, but they are moving their business to services. So now they provide databases, etc. And for a lab to buy a high throughput is still relatively expensive. So if on the one side they would give this away, just the hardware, which is not the value of their business today, and they would also, that would make it cheaper for the labs, and more labs could make it to use high throughput. And also, if we could also create some centers in which high throughput is just used for the community, that's a solution. I think on that's it. Electrocatalysis, photocatalysis are much behind. Much in front of other heterogeneous or homogeneous catalysis, because they were already created in this era of digital catalysis, which is not the case for other fields.
Yes, because it's time consuming to make a new material, and if you already have it, you can go forward. Otherwise, you are just keeping up. You are still left behind till you develop the material.
So if I conclude, the investing in the development of new recipes to synthesize maybe new materials is time consuming and expensive. So the knowledge
Yes.
coming out of it is valuable, both maybe for researchers, but also for companies.
Also something else. If you, for example, if the industry has already developed a catalyst which is work at that level, for us to make a scale up of the catalyst that we already made in the lab, it's a little bit difficult because not everybody has a pilot. A lab pilot which can test a high quantity of that catalyst. Everybody works with micrograms or at least grams, maximum grams, because everybody's testing at small scale.
Yeah, so having this intermediate scale to really prove the value of the catalyst maybe to industry partners is missing, and therefore a lot of research that is done on micro scale is stuck because industry thinks it's just micro scale. First prove it on larger scale, and therefore it's not translated into business.
And it's lost. All the research is lost because the industry is not willing to invest a lot of money. They already have a process that works, a catalyst that works, and they're probably not willing to invest a lot of money. And I understand them because they already have a process. It works. For them, it's okay. They have the result, they have the money, they have the process that the whole process is working. And now to rearrange the whole process around the new catalyst, it's a little bit difficult, and it's time consuming and a lot of money. And you don't know for sure that it will work in the end.
Yeah. So on one hand, I think you are not sharing the knowledge on new recipes or specific synthesis methods, because there is an economic value associated to it. On the other side, it would be very valuable for others to learn about it and to build on top of it. I think if you look into the open source community in other areas, I think, for example, software development or electronics development, I think that's very valuable. But then there should be a model in which you are enabling to openly unlock or share your knowledge, but still have some kind of traceability, that if this knowledge is translated into economic value by a specific company or industry that uses your recipe for large-scale manufacturing of new catalysts, that there is some value coming back to you. So once I already thought about maybe you can use something like a blockchain methodology, in which you are able to share freely your recipes or your knowledge, but still have a good traceability in that it's used. But it's more, I think, a future idea. So I think solving this problem by getting an incentive to freely share all the knowledge that you have on the materials that you synthesized and the recipes, without losing this economic value or this potential that you develop by doing it yourself, I think is an important part.
I agree.
I think also on a similar matter, that's it. Scale up is not well understood in open sources. So that's it. This is a knowledge that is very that stays within the companies, but it's of great public interest. So that's again similar to what I said before. If you can make some centers in which industry and academia can have these scale up facilities in which there's some shared, they share as much as they can, but they don't share indeed what is their own property, but they share the common knowledge. Then we can make scale up with more knowledge and in a useful way, I think. So there are already also some examples of this, and also the European Commission on the new European projects for science enforces the as open as possible policy as close as necessary. So that's, I think, the way to go in what concerns knowledge and data sharing.
Yeah, especially like sharing raw data. So not condensed or concluded data that only shows the final results that you think are interesting, but sharing the raw data also gives others to learn about all the things that didn't happen or didn't went right. It's coming back to all the negative results that people generate.
Yeah, but and there I think indeed, as you said, there's a lot to learn with contiguous fields, also biology. that's one of the topics we mentioned before. A lot of funding going to medicine, indeed, because of the crisis. That's normal. But and also we can learn from the methods there. For instance, it has been in the last few years considered that the value of the data of clinical trials that is now on the companies, on the pharmaceutical companies, is so high for the public that it should be disclosed after some time. So we can think about the same for catalysts, for materials, because indeed this is of great interest, and sometimes it's of no value after a few years for the companies anymore.
Yeah, I think the industry has the same problem. I've spoken to many industrial catalyst companies, and especially with Shell, I had many discussions. And what you see is that the interaction between such an industrial company and research group is so limited, because the industrial companies are so scared that if they share the exact catalyst that they are using for different industrial processes, that it will be communicated via the researchers to one of their competitors. That researchers are guessing, in some sense, what the industry is using, and then trying to optimize their research in that area. While if there was an open discussion and industry could really share, this is the catalyst that we now have, try to improve it directly, I think there could be so much more useful developments coming from this collaboration. This specific scientist at Shell that I spoke, he only said it was he did it once where he really had a good collaboration with research, but many of the projects they are not explicitly telling what the real catalysts are. So then it's only then the usability of the project is less. I don't know if others, maybe Maria, maybe you have some experience with collaboration with industry. Or Monica, I'm sorry.
Actually not. No, for the moment, no collaboration with the industry. It's just between universities or small research groups, but no industry.
And to the aspect that you say you're trying to synthesize a new material every day.
Actually, not every day. Let's say not every
or
day.
as often as possible. Oh, that's a sad news, Maria, that you're not able to use your mic. If you have a question, please type. But Monica, how do you log the recipe? Do you still write it in your journal? Do you?
Yes, I use research booklets, and it's just trial and error. You make the material, you try to analyze it, see if you got what you wanted.
Yeah.
And if not, you're trying to manipulate again the recipe and see if it worked. You change one parameter and see if you got the right result, and that's it.
Yeah. But if you are a year later, is it then easy to search through all the previous experiments that you have been doing?
Yes, it's easy because we usually make a flow chart. Then you name the sample, and you get some parameters that you are really interested, and you put it in the flow chart, and then you see which parameter you manipulated and which result did you get, or you improved or not the catalyst.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the procedure.
I think there there's a lot that can be done, and I think the role there is for like catalysis communities, societies, to help the labs, because at least when collaborating with companies, for me it was clear that they have very good databases, and they moved on to electronic lab journals for very long. And okay, Monica example is great, but most of the times, indeed, we cannot reproduce what is in lab notebooks because the person forgot to write something or what else. But with electronic notebooks, this can be really circumvented, and companies have so much experience on this. on creating these systems on their own, even though, again, this is not really value. Okay, there's intrinsic value because they can keep it, everything up to date, but it's not, they don't sell this. So if this could be shared with the community, it would make a huge difference to the labs. And an electronic notebook is also much easier to share online than if you have it on paper.
Yeah. Is anyone aware of Material Zone?
Nope.
Haven't heard of it.
No.
If you Google it, Material Zone is a company. I think it started in Israel. They are basically developing this digital note or lab book. So I think where the focus is to get most of your R&D lab equipment, in some sense, connected to a central data storage facility. So you are digitally storing all the parameters of your units while synthesizing, while analyzing, while whatever you do. So that you can easily analyze all the results, but also share the raw data with other group members within the group, or maybe with other researchers, or you are able to sell this data to other people that want to join.
All right. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah, this is also something that we within VSP are working on to. First of all, to digitize, I would say, the synthesis part. So you can just say, today I want to synthesize this specific material, and you type it in on your laptop. You send the command to the system in the lab, and then it starts to do the synthesis, and then it notifies you when it's ready. But in the future, we also want to connect to more units so that you can use the same platform to also connect your analysis research through your synthesis data. And you can say, okay, with this settings, I synthesized my material, and then this were the results of the material. And then I think you are constructively building this material database in an improved way. Is any one of you using machine learning to extrapolate experimental data? Lars, you mentioned computational modeling.
Well, yeah. So Lars again here. So I do computational modeling more on transport heat and mass transport. So I come from chemical engineering.
Yeah.
I do, like, in my free time, I try to be a little bit on the topic of machine learning, data science for chemical engineering and catalysis. For catalysis, there is quite some publications now I see coming up. So yeah, but I'm not using it for my research now.
Okay. Anyone else using these new capabilities too?
So guys, if there are like further comments, raise your hand now, because we are going to close in a few minutes. There will be a coming webinar soon, so you will receive an email about that with an invitation. You will also receive in the coming days like all the comments and a couple of ideas that came out of this webinar. It will be great to also have your feedback about that. We will try to write down a few more practical thoughts about that, trying to figure out what to do and if we can find like some solutions together. So if there is someone else that wants to, so first of all, thank you all for attending. I don't know if I can.
Maybe, sorry, just had a suggestion. Maybe right now everyone could type what would be the most interesting, the topic they would like to hear the next time. So
yes, sure,
we cannot promise that will be the next one, but to collect all the ideas, maybe we could already have it on the chat. What do you think?
Sure, it will be great. I cannot see the chat, that's why I didn't think about it. But yeah, sure, it will be great. So I will give you a few more minutes so you can type in.
Just type a subject that you would like, that's all.
And if you feel like you want to give the webinar, so you want to be the one hosting the webinar because you know about a lot about the topic, we will be happy to co-host. And so I would like to thank Aaike for his presentation and ideas and also inspiration. And I would like to thank Pedro, because without him it was not going to be possible. And also the people that attended. Please keep joining, because if we are going to keep doing this, we're definitely going to have a lot of ideas and a lot of points for our manifesto. I know it sounds ambitious, but we really want to do it. So please participate, because this is going to be something we will do together.
Lars, coming back to your suggestion, what do you mean with variance? You mean the different outputs?
Yeah, I mean now, if I produce a catalyst right now, right, on a big scale, like if I take samples from that, what is the variance I get in testing them? Right.
So another way of saying reproducibility of trying to get the same results.
Exactly.
Yeah. And probably reproducibility is both in the synthesis part, but also in the analysis part. I think if you dive deep into, for example, catalyst activity, knowing exactly how many catalytic active sites you have is already a very complex and sciencey part.
Yeah, exactly. If I buy a ton of catalysts now from Shell or whatever company, and if I take a few gram samples, what will I get on an average, right?
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
So I guess the time is over. So thank you so much for being here. We will come back to you with a new email with some key points and the date and the topic for a new webinar.
On top of that, we will also try to draft the first, I always forget this word.
Manifesto.
Manifesto. To make it more clear to other people where we are focusing on or what are the topics we are discussing. Please feel free to also invite other people for the other sessions if you think it's interesting for them. So share it within your group or share it within your colleagues at maybe other universities. So the broader the network, the more interesting I think the discussion will be. I also want to mention that we recorded the session. The final version, after editing, we will send it around. So feel free to comment on this. If you don't want us to make it public, then we will just share the presentations of Pedro and I. So feel free to say what you think of it.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I liked it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for the fruitful discussion. It was very interesting to hear about your ideas. We will collect your ideas through the form you will receive, and we will use them to actually draw the manifesto of materials development. If you enjoyed the conversation, please come and register for the coming webinar on our website, materialpioneers.com. It will be about changing academia beyond publish and perish. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you at the coming webinar next Tuesday at 3.